Hi, this is an oral history interview for the Jacksonville Broadcasters Association. It's July 9th, 2019, and we're interviewing Sharon Siegel-Cohen. Sharon, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Glad to have you with us.
Thank you.
And we want to talk about your interesting career in broadcasting, in large part here at Wjxt.
Yes.
And the interesting thing, just to start with, is you grew up in Jacksonville, watching mostly Wjxt Channel 4, and on that station was the Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Yes.
So you kind of wanted to grow up to be Mary, and you did.
How about that? But no Mr. Grant.
That's right.
Everything else is Mary, but no Mr. Grant.
Yeah, well, Mr. Grant was an interesting part of that newsroom.
Yes.
So early on, I don't know how old you were when you were watching that sitcom, but you kind of made up your mind what your career was going to be.
In high school, but I mean, that was Saturday night TV at its best. So you watched Mary Tyler Moore and Carol Burnett's show, but I thought that would be interesting. You know, she looked busy and an interesting career in journalism. So then I got an internship when I was in college. And I can still remember rolling the teleprompter for Bill Grove and like shaking because he was an idol too growing up.
Right.
And George Winterling was there and Dick Stratton. So it was sort of like a dream come true just as an intern.
And we'll talk about this, I guess, but television has changed.
You think? Yeah.
But going back, you went to high school at Wolfson.
Correct.
And then on to the University of Florida.
Yeah.
And it was broadcasting, not journalism, that you were interested in.
Yeah, I think they've changed a little bit now,
Yeah.
but yeah.
And talk about the University of Florida experience.
It was hands-on, and that
Yeah.
was really how I got my internship. I had a little audition reel and brought it to the news director, Bill Grove, and he saw it. But back in those days, the equipment was so heavy. So you have girls like me, we're lugging this heavy equipment. I don't know how we did it in the heat. But I remember they had sent the students to, it was a prison escape in Stark. And I did this to this day, this real corny stand-up, you know. Behind these walls, a number of attempts occur every year, but this one was successful. And I just look at that. But I guess it was good enough that he thought, you know, you could get the internship.
Yeah.
So that's how I got it.
So an internship at Wjxt.
Yeah.
And what was that like?
It was good. Back then, they didn't have a new newscast, but they had the old midday show, but they had a little portion of the news. They let me write some of the stories for that little news section. And it's a manual typewriter, and it was sort of like whoever was in the newsroom, Ernie Mastriani or whoever, would do the news portion. So as an intern, they'd let me do it. Of course, while I was in school, I always thought I was going to be on air. But once I like being behind the scenes, and that was what the job was. When they decided to expand and start a noon newscast, that was the job that opened. I was excited to accept. That led to the first job, and when I started, it was really exciting. Growing up here, my family was so proud, and back then we used to do credits at the end of the newscast. We don't do that so much, but they were just so proud to see my name. But yeah, I was writing and deciding what stories were going in the show, but I always kid the people I work with now, everything's so computerized. Back then we had those clunky manual typewriters. So you're writing them and Tom Wills would look at you, crossing it out, then you had to retype it again. So it's very different now.
Some of the folks watching this interview may not understand what you're talking about, but that's
Okay.
they'll have to do some research and find out what a typewriter is.
Oh, okay.
So the amount of news then on Channel 4 versus the amount of news now is an interesting concept.
Oh my goodness.
The total amount of news, number of hours of news back then was?
See, a half hour Maybe they
half-hour
do.
newscast, first of all.
And the 6 o'clock news.
Yeah.
That was mainly the main newscast. Then they added the noon. The morning show, I don't even know if we did a morning show because it was CBS News.
Yeah.
So it was the noon, 6 o'clock, 11 o'clock half hour. That's kind of it. Now we're doing 10 hours a day.
10 hours a day.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's incredible.
It is incredible. But it seems to work, huh?
It really does. You know, you think, well, how do you fill the news? There's so much stuff. It seems like also we're more in our counties. I don't know in the early days if we covered Nassau, Clay, St. John's like we do now, or South Georgia. So especially St. John's County. I mean, these counties are just booming. So there just seems like a lot of stories. Unfortunately, there is crime, which I don't recall. I'm sure we covered crime in the early days, but it seems it's just more prevalent, unfortunately.
And I guess it would be an interesting discussion about whether there's more crime or it's getting more coverage. Probably both.
A little both.
Yeah. And as people do in the TV news business, you moved on to another station.
Yes. You always, in an early career, you want to go to the big time. So I did. I was here for 4 years, then moved to WSB in Atlanta for 2 years. I liked that, but at the time I thought it was a hard schedule. Now I'm on the same schedule, I like it, but in those years it was that overnight schedule. So I did Atlanta for 2 years, then Tampa at a CBS station at the time for 5 years. I really liked Tampa too. But those positions were producer. They asked me to be an executive producer back at WJXT in '90. So it's a little more manager, a higher position. And that's when I came back.
One of the big stories that you recall is Jacksonville getting an NFL franchise.
That still was a thrill because nobody believed Jacksonville was not going to get it. You know, everybody's a naysayer. And Sam Kavaris is at the NFL meetings. Nancy Shaffron, the news director, she's on the phone with him. I'm in the studio. Jake Godbold, the former mayor, there was a group of executives. They're upstairs in our conference room. Nancy gets the word, we got it. I ran to the studio, we got it. Remember Deborah Gianolis, we got what? I think we were so excited, we still didn't believe it. I was like, Nancy, we got the team, we got the team. That was really thrilling.
And now we're about to celebrate the 25th anniversary of that
Amazing.
event. And it seems to have worked, huh?
It did. I mean, I think people can't imagine not having the team, but it's such an important part of Jacksonville, and they've been such, an amazing citizen and giving back to both Mr. Weaver and now Mr. Kahn. But it's just really put us on the map.
And any other stories that come to mind?
When Bill Clinton was running for office, we hosted a town meeting. We were part of Post Newsweek at the time, and all the television stations, we pulled it together. We're going to have a town meeting live, but it was going to be at WJXT studio. So I was one of the producers. My role, I think I held the microphone when people in the audience asked questions. That was exciting, but I was more interested. There was a big protest outside our lawn. So, you never know. I think then George Bush was live in the Miami studio. So we were fair, we were equal, but that was quite memorable when, our president was in our studio.
And television was and is an essential part of politics.
Absolutely. And through the years, people were very critical. I think it's good because if they're not critical, you're not doing your job. So we have both sides, thinking we have an agenda through the years. We really don't. Sometimes I wish people could see what goes on in the newsroom. They're just getting the show on. What's the news? I got to write it. I got to time it out in the allotted time. There's not an agenda. We're trying to be fair. a lot of young people who are in the business, and this around the country, but we don't have meetings had at the, there's no agenda, we just, do the best we can to be fair.
Mm-hmm. And you still have interns?
Oh yeah, we do, and I'm in charge of the interns. Isn't
Great.
that funny?
I was hoping so.
The difference is they're paying the interns now. We used to not pay them. But it's good because we really encourage the interns then to be the future journalists with us.
You have a special perspective on that.
I do, and then we have a big orientation. We say, you are going to be our future, so learn what you can and see. Mm-hmm. And I said, see if this is the business you want. You really have to be passionate. Do you mind working overnights? Do you mind working on the holidays? And see if you like it. Mm-hmm. Most of them do. They've gone on to bigger things.
And from your perspective now, after all these years in broadcasting, you think it's still a good career?
It's going to be a different career. I think it's going to be a lot more the web and digital, and that's how people get their news. Mm-hmm. I think there's always going to be a need to get information, but how are they going to get it? It's the young people don't watch television the way we did. 6 o'clock news comes on, that's when you sat down dinner and watched TV, and then Walter Cronkite. It's just going to be different for them. Mm-hmm. But there's going to be a need to get information. Mm-hmm. And that's another story, meeting Walter Cronkite.
Oh, yes.
It was in the late 90s. We'll enter professional contests, and one of which is the Edward R. Murrow Award. Mm-hmm. And I would help put together our entry. It would show investigations, maybe some of the breaking news, weather, sports, and we won for best small market in the country. Mm. So a group of us went to New Orleans where it was held, and Walter Cronkite gave out the award. But they had a reception before. And of course, this is the day now we'd have selfies with him. I think we did have a picture, but it was just different. He walked in the room. These were seasoned journalists. I think people almost giddy, like the royal family has arrived. And at the time, his wife, this little lady, was kind of on the side. I felt kind of bad for her. She was just sitting there. I said, "Hi, Mrs. Cronkite, can I get you anything to drink?" She said, "Yeah, I'd like a drink." Can we get Mrs. Cronkite a drink? It was very memorable. That was exciting.
And I might say better and more impressive than presidents and other people. Uncle Walter.
Uncle Walter is still the best. Another moment, I was in Atlanta, and the network was doing some kind of interview with Jimmy Carter, mm-hmm. the former president, but he was in the studio, and I knew he was going to do the interview, so I had bought one of his recent books. I walk in the studio. I think there's a Secret Service person in the door, but he's all alone waiting to go on this interview. And I said, "President Carter, would you mind autographing my book?" And he says, "No." I said, and I was nervous. I said, "I'm a producer here, believe it or not." And he said, "Why wouldn't I believe it?" And that just struck me so cute. It was very sweet.
Yeah. Hard to think about anybody else famous that you've come in contact with, but does anyone come to mind?
Well, years ago, Dan Rather was here. And again, people were, poor guy, it was a very busy news week, and I forget what the story was. But he's on the phone, and we're all kind of hovering around him. But he was very gracious. I'm sure he was annoyed. Mm-hmm. And then Deborah Giannoulis and I were part of a team that produced a documentary on domestic violence called Behind Closed Doors. And the two of us and a photographer, spent the night at Hubbard House, which is our local domestic violence shelter. And a lot happened that night, and that led to this documentary. Mm-hmm. Well, we won the Peabody Award, which is the most prestigious journalist award. Mm-hmm. It was in the Waldorf Astoria, New York. And that year, so we're in this huge ballroom. Katie Couric won for her. She'd done a colonoscopy live. Ed Bradley from CBS 60 Minutes, he won. Dan Rather, he won for something. The Aaron Sorkin from The West Wing, he won. So we're like stardom. I mean, and it was a few of us from Jacksonville, including my parents. They were thrilled, but that was huge. And you're like, we're rubbing elbows with the biggest and the best. So that was really a memorable moment.
Yeah. Let's talk briefly about your ALS.
Okay. So 2 years ago, my family is on a trip. So this is 2017 in New York. I'm there about an hour, and I trip on the sidewalk. Well, if you know New York, the sidewalks are pretty bad. So I didn't think anything of it. I'm limping around, my ankle was swollen. But I continued to limp for quite a while when I came back. So finally I went to an orthopedist, and he x-rayed and said it was tendonitis. Okay. Physical therapy. I'm doing physical therapy and appear to be getting worse. So finally, after a few months, I went back and I said, people think maybe I've had a stroke. I'm really walking very bad. This time they started doing a lot of testing, MRIs, and there's a thing called a nerve conduction study, and that's when they determined it was nerves, and it was a form of ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. Like, who gets Lou Gehrig's disease? It's so rare and so terrible. So I'm coming up on a year from being diagnosed, 2018, and I'm still able to work, though now I'm in a wheelchair. And the support has been incredible. Initially, when you're diagnosed with something like that, you're almost not ashamed, but it was so hard to talk about it. But I feel like with my voice and with the TV station behind me, I'm going to do what I can to help find a cure. We had a walk several months ago, and I had a team of people from around the country. They came in, and it's just hard to believe Lou Gehrig's disease, that's been almost 80 years, and this thing has still not been cured.
A big turnout for Sharon's team.
It was really, it was just remarkable, but I will continue to do what I can. And this last year, I've won a Courage Award from Orange Theory Fitness. I've raised almost $38,000 for ALS, and I just, it's time to find a cure, and if I can help in anything, I will do that.
That's great. And talk about your family a little bit.
I've been married for 27 years. We have a son. My husband's Joel, my son's Martin. He just graduated from the University of Florida, and now he's starting dental school at the University of Pennsylvania, so we're very proud. My parents, Helen and Eddie Siegel, they've lived here for many years. My mother's from Jacksonville, and they're very supportive and still here and watch Channel 4, of course. And I have a sister, Frances. She lives in Atlanta.
Anything that you would like to add? Any thoughts about the changes you've seen in journalism and television?
It's a lot faster pace.
Yeah.
When we had those manual typewriters, it's slow. But it's a very interesting career. I've been thinking a lot. I met really interesting people. It's never dull. It can be hard, it can be frustrating, but it's exciting. There's a pace that boom, boom, boom. And even being here now, I'm surrounded by young people. I don't dwell on my illness because there's just too much to do. I'm busy, and you'll come in maybe a little down, and there's a bad storm, or there's some crime, or there's some political crazy thing. So really get your mind, and I think it's helped me stay young until this. I'm with the young people and feel good about it. So it's very exciting. It's like being the front row of a parade, and that's what it's been all these years.
So all in all, a great career.
A great career, good friends, and really with this thing, I spoke at the ALS walk that Lou Gehrig said, the famous speech, he felt like the luckiest man on earth. And in some ways, I feel like the luckiest woman. I'm surrounded by family, friends, coworkers who are so kind, and like I said, friends from around the country who have come to support me. So I'm lucky, and hopefully we'll find a cure for this.
Sharon Siegel-Cohen, thank you very much.
Thank you, Harry, and thank you for the Jacksonville Broadcasters.